Shabbat Shalom. When we read Torah on the Bima, we have two gabbis, the two people who stand here and here, whose primary job is to check that the Torah is being read accurately. The gabbi's job is important for several reasons. First, as the words of Torah are sacred just as they are written, any variation to those words may change the meaning of our history and of what God asks from us. The Torah reader must read as precisely as possible. Second, when the Torah reader gets lost or needs a boost, then the gabbis stand right next to them for that support and guidance. I know I've needed that before, and I certainly needed that today. And finally, we only have two designated gabbis to prevent the rest of the congregation from loudly pointing out the Torah reader's mistakes. So imagine what it would feel like to read Torah in a setting in which the entire congregation felt it was their responsibility to correct the Torah reader. Every time the Torah reader would act like a human being and make a mistake, different people would shout out their corrections at slightly different times, in slightly different tempos and volumes. Each of these correctors would probably use a different tune when shouting out a correction, as different Torah readers learn different melodies. And of course, as our congregation is made up of, yet again, human beings, a good portion of the people correcting would also suggest incorrect corrections from time to time. As Torah reading is already a stressful endeavor for many of us who do so, this added confusion and pressure might make Torah reading near impossible, or at least too embarrassing of an experience to ever volunteer for willingly. In the Talmud Bavli, Masechet Bava Metzia, our rabbis teach, Noach lo li'adam she'apil atzmo l'chivshan ha'esh ve'al yalbin panei chavero barabim. It's better for a person, it's nicer for a person to throw herself into a fiery furnace than to humiliate someone else in public. As Jewish individuals, we must do everything in our power to avoid embarrassing someone else in front of friends, family, and community. When asked from where the rabbis derive their teaching, they praise Tamar, one of the heroes of Parshat Vayeshev. In a story that occurs earlier in our Parsha than what we read this Shabbat, Judah's first two sons die before they are able or willing to consummate their marriage with Tamar, the wife who has passed from one brother to the next. Now, Yehuda fears for the life of his third son, Shua, and tells Tamar to return to her father's house until Shua is old enough to marry. Soon enough, it's clear that Yehuda has no intention of ever letting Shua marry Tamar. So now Tamar is stuck. For years, she cannot marry anyone else, as she is technically betrothed to Shua. But rather than sit in sorrow, Tamar takes the situation into her own hands. When Yehuda travels on the local road to shear some sheep, Tamar disguises herself as the town prostitute, attracts Yehuda to her, and takes his cord and seal as collateral until he can pay her back. When Yehuda later tries to pay that local prostitute, he can't find her in any of the surrounding towns. Fast forward a few months, and when word comes to Yehuda that Tamar is pregnant from someone unknown, he calls for her public execution. Tamar then presents Yehuda's cord and seal without revealing Yehuda's name to the townspeople. Yehuda, recognizing the cord and seal and acknowledging his wrongdoing, declares that Tamar is much more righteous than he. Even after Yehuda has riled up the town with cries for execution, Tamar still refrains from humiliating her father-in-law. As the rabbis of the Talmud reflect, Tamar would rather throw herself into a fire than embarrass another person in front of his community. Now, last night, I was asked to finish the story just so we know Tamar's ending. Tamar ends up giving birth to, from this experience, giving birth to twins. One of those twins is the ancestor of King David. So hers is the line, she starts that line of King David with Yehuda. We don't know what happens with her marriage. That's not told in the text. When we might be tempted to say something humiliating about or to another person, we are usually not under the threat of public execution that Tamar experiences. We can usually afford to take a beat and to ask ourselves whether it is actually necessary to point out that person's mistakes or wrongdoings. Sometimes at work or among family and friends, we do need to call another person out for the sake of safety, accuracy, even someone else's personal humility. Most of the time, we have a minute to ask ourselves, am I just worried about my own personal preferences here, or is this actually a potential danger or offense or lie? Will it change anything if I speak up about this person at this time, in this space? Even then, we ask ourselves how we might address the other person with the least embarrassing words possible. We can pull them aside now or later, and if it's something that must be addressed right now, we can choose our words and tone wisely and compassionately before we proceed. As we come from a tradition that teaches in Vayikra in Leviticus, Hocher tochiach et amitecha, rebuke your fellow without hating them in your heart. Refraining from humiliation does not have to mean staying silent in the face of wrongdoing or even in the face of frustration. Still, the latter part of the verse, Velo tisa alav chet, do not bear wrongdoing because of them, reminds us that the call to reprimand cannot be used as an excuse to take our speech into the realm of hurt or embarrassment. Sometimes, however, the impulse to publicly embarrass another does not come from well-meaning intentions. Sometimes, especially today, we find ourselves in a space in which our words and our actions seem to have no or little immediate consequence on our own lives, especially when a screen lies between one person and another. Our inhibitions might be lowered as we consider what's appropriate or necessary to share in community. On social media or in the comments section of a video or an article, for instance, we can call names, we can hurl insults completely anonymously, potentially inflicting a whole lot of damage onto another person's confidence and personal integrity. Even when we attach our name to posts, comments, widely shared emails and texts, our inability to see or hear another person's reactions can give us a false sense of emotional distance. As a room full of people who have, I would guess, read countless emails, text messages, and posts to and about us and others, we know the psychological effect that those publicly shared words can have on us, especially when we cannot control the spread of information from that point forward. Just as we regulate our words when we speak with others in a full room, we have the responsibility to think before we type in the public space that is our online world. Of course, even with the best of intentions, we will make mistakes when we try to balance public humiliation with the fiery furnace of not criticizing at all. We will, of course, say things that we never intended to be embarrassing. Even when we do not intend to hurt another, we still have the responsibility to take ownership of our words, to apologize, and to actively learn when our words or actions have hurt our friends, colleagues, or loved ones. Even when we feel personally humiliated by another's accusations, we have the responsibility to refrain from shooting back, especially for the sake of getting even. I didn't know, or that's not fair, are never excuses for disregarding another human being's humanity. Our synagogue is a simple yet ideal place to practice living up to Tamar's example. When we send emails about issues that we are understandably passionate about, we can double-check who exactly is on the mailing list. Instead of shouting a request towards the bima, we can flag down a rabbi or gabbai and whisper what's needed to them. In this space, like it or not, news spreads fast. we have the power to spread the kind of news and input that will encourage and heal rather than embarrass our fellow community members. At Congregation Beth Torah, we have the power to maintain the kind of culture on which we pride ourselves, one in which we have the confidence both to share what we know needs to change and to praise who and what in this space brightens our Jewish experience. Thank goodness, at Congregation Beth Torah, we do not have to consider the threats of fiery furnace or public humiliation as we practice how to bring Tamar's compassionate, mindful communication into our public lives beyond Shabbat, beyond this building, and beyond this circle of family and friends. Shabbat Shalom, and almost Chanukah Sameach. We'd love to invite Sid to lead us in Musaf.